Welcome to another episode of Dropkick Basement. Beginning of the summertime is what we're getting into. So I've got myself, your leader, your host, Mike Madden. Joining me, co-host Tommy Schultz, gimmickless Tommy Schultz. Tommy, how we be today?
We be good. DC back in black as I strut my way to the ring.
Very good, very good. So yeah, we're without Matt today. He's on assignment, otherwise disposed. So we will power through like we always do. And this particular one, I thought about this one. Because you always love a good like super card, right?
Oh yeah.
Where you've got talent from a couple different companies, and we are getting close. I think what is it? This coming weekend,
yes,
the 25th, will be New Japan and AEW's Forbidden Door. So, in the fighting spirit of Forbidden Door, I've decided that we're going to basically take their idea and run it up the flagpole with the 1996 roster of WWF and the 1996 roster of New Japan Pro Wrestling. For better or worse, you've got WWF was in a flux at this point. So, you're seeing the beginning of the NWO. They're starting to lose a little bit in the Monday Night Wars. So there's a little bit of momentum. Guys are leaving to go to WCW on big contracts. So you've got a roster that lost some heads, but still has a bunch of guys that are kind of at the top of their game, but just haven't had the push yet. So we certainly have a lot to choose from. On the other side of that, this is, some say it might be a down year for New Japan 96, but the research that I've done, like their G1 that year was filled with, Hall of Famers.
Oh yeah.
You got guys like you still had Ricky Choshu was still there. You had the Three Musketeers. You've got the junior division was on fire and great, but I think a lot of that junior division was leaning on the talent from WCW at the time. And that is
100%.
And that's one of the rules that we've come up with for this build a super card challenge here. We can't use any of those guys that were spending time, even if they were spending half their year in Japan under WCW contracts as gaijins, American wrestlers. We're not using them. So unfortunately, if you got them written down, Tommy, Scott Flash Norton not available for this exercise.
My dream match of Scott Norton versus Ahmed Johnson has gone down the tubes.
You know what? That's not for nothing.
That's meat slapping meat.
Just get big sloppy guys like botching spots and.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want to shit on Scott Norton. I think Scott Norton had his merits, and certainly his best work was in New Japan. He's a former IWGP champion. But
you can shit on Ahmed Johnson all you want.
Yeah, well, I will. But that's that's the one thing is like when he came to the U.S., they had a lot of high hopes. He was like, what was he?
Yeah.
Like co-main event of like one of the first Nitros with Savage, and he was going to work a program with Savage, and then I think they kind of realized, oh shit, Lex Luger is coming into the company, so let's have Randy Savage and Lex Luger feud for literally 4 years straight.
Yes.
And Scott
and
Norton,
I don't really think that they had, at that time, I don't think that they had anyone in WCW that could work the style that he worked in Japan, really, with him. So, like, he was always mismatched.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they also teamed him up with Ice Pick, where they were
they were Fire and Ice, and then he was with Buff as Vicious and Delicious for a bit.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean... all apologies to Scott Flash Norton. Your U.S. work is not your best. But with that being said, let's tackle the task at hand. Okay. And I'm going to cede the time at the beginning of this for you to give me your start building your card.
Okay, so I want to preface all of this by saying that 96 WWF. That was my heyday. That's when I was like 7. So like that's when I'm really starting to understand everything kind of at the same time.
Sure.
But at the same time, like New Japan was not even attainable in any respect as a 7-year-old kid.
You didn't tape trade?
Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed on the internet yet. But at the same time, like I've never really gone back and checked out that era of New Japan all that much. So like this was a bit, hazy for me.
Okay.
And as you kind of said early, the 1996 New Japan roster may have been in a downtime, but at the same time, WWF, I would say since maybe 93, this was the worst roster that they had to work with.
Yeah.
Because you just lost Hall, Nash, Waltman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brett's on hiatus filming Lonesome Dove.
Yeah,
so
that's true. Yeah.
Those are 4 of your heavy hitters.
Yeah.
Void.
Yeah. 4 voids that are kind of it's tough to maneuver in and out. Like if we had said like, hey, take the WrestleMania roster and do this all with the WrestleMania roster, it might look a little bit different, but that's why. Again, my brain goes in a certain way where it's like, well, if they had a Forbidden Door pay-per-view, it would be in June. It wouldn't be in April. It wouldn't be that time.
Exactly.
So that's really that's what I'm what I'm lining up, so to speak.
So we're working with the summer of '96.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so what I tried to do was, to the best of my knowledge and with the cards we're dealt, put together the best wrestling card that I could, as opposed to like what AEW and New Japan do now, where it's just like either dream matches. I wouldn't say that, maybe a few of these, but just like the most solid work rate card that I could think of with the hand we were dealt.
That's right. Yeah.
So to kick things off, I thought hot, heavy, you go Dick Togo versus Savio Vega.
Oh, okay. All right.
I was always a big fan of Dick Togo when he came into the WWF. Mm-hmm. Revisiting some of his stuff in New Japan. Big fan of his. And Savio Vega, I feel like, was a slept-on guy.
He could have really good matches,
back in those days.
Yeah.
The dude could go, but again, like, maybe it's a victim of like timing and stuff, but he never really was able to showcase everything he had, aside from like the feud that he had with Austin. Everything else is somewhat forgettable.
And this would have been just after he had come out of that feud with Austin. Exactly. So like he's having some of the best matches. I think he was a good tag team partner with Razor Ramon, like I guess a year before.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
And that gave him like a good shine, and he had like a good introduction with that. And I still think like, given a guy that can, he can wrestle lucha, so he's got a little bit of like, I think you can lean on him to do a little bit, a bunch with like an opening match and kind of go with somebody like Dick Togo. And Dick Togo at that time, probably about 2 or 3 years in the business. He's probably, I think when he came into the WWF 2 years later, he was, right around that like 220 mark. So he's a little bit like heavier, but I think at this time he was wrestling in the junior heavyweight division.
Yeah, and I'm going to I'll circle back to this in about 2 matches or so. I originally had him opening with someone different that I thought would be an even better match than what I just gave you, but because I was doing some research, someone that I thought was still they were technically with the company, but they, were injured or phasing out. I had to take them off the match that I had originally booked.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So Dick Togo and Savio is your opener. Very good.
All right. Now, 2, I kind of went the way of this is kind of like what I feel like a Forbidden Door thing would be, where like you take an established tag team from one promotion, and then you take two formidable mid to top guys and team them together against that team.
Right.
So for the second match, I'm going with the IWGP Tag Team Champions at the time, if this is taking place in June. Yamazaki and Iizuka. I am very bad at
That's okay.
pronouncing these names, so I'm going to preface that as well. And they're going to take on Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Goldust.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So again, this is more just along the lines of you want to have a good match, and not only that, I wanted to try and keep some continuity when it comes to like the WWF side of things, where you're not just going to team like a heel and a baby face. You want to take two heels, and now you're going to team them up against the IWGP Tag Champs, and I think that's like, because again with this you're going to have to play the politics card of who goes over and all that stuff.
Yep.
So I feel like when you if you have the tag champs in New Japan going up against two heels, that's an easy way to have the champs come out victorious.
And is Goldust is your Intercontinental Champion at this time in WWF, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I believe he is still the IC champ.
Hunter, and again, I think kind of reading the tea leaves of what you're saying is you're going to, we've got to put the IWGP, Yamazaki and Iizuka have to go over, because also like I think WWF was still punishing Hunter at this time.
Oh, 100%.
And after the curtain jerk and all that other stuff, so he could have been like, if everything turned out differently, he's wrestling again. He's wrestling for the King of the Ring that same time period.
He's winning the King.
He's winning the King of the Ring, right?
I think.
But in the grand scheme of things, like having him teaming with Goldust again, they're a formidable like mid to upper card tag team of heels, and their characters going up against like your fighting IWGP champion. So very good.
All right, now number 3. This one I had to change this one because initially I had the 1-2-3 Kid in on the WWF side of things, but apparently his last match with the company was in May of
That's right.
1996.
And I think he fucked his neck up.
He went out with an injury, and then once his contract expired, he left.
That's right. Yep.
And went to WCW in like September-ish, I believe. All right, so 3. This is not going to make all that much sense in terms of where one guy stands with one promotion and the other stands with the other, but this is strictly just like I think that this match would bang, and it's Jushin Thunder Liger versus Skip, aka Chris Candido.
Okay, yeah, that we'll get to it when we get to mine. That was on one of my drafts.
Okay,
because I'm like, I think they ended up working. I think Candido went over to New Japan, and he was part of the junior division, I think, in like 2003 and 2004.
Oh, okay.
And I think he ended up like working either in a tag team or against Liger for a little while. They did a tour. He did a tour over there and got in good with the office and actually ended up like having this match eventually. But up until this point, like, and you're thinking to yourself like, all right, well.
And this is like peak both guys.
Liger had done his stints early in the decade in WCW, where he's wrestling guys like Brad Armstrong and Pillman, and then he did come back like the next year in WCW, and I think he had Eddie Guerrero and Malenko, and certainly like, so he's the cream of the crop of your juniors, and in a perfect world, Candido would have been like the guy to put up against them and just tear the house down and bring the people up, for
100%.
a matchup like that.
And then you again being that he's skip of the body Donnas, you have a very easy, this guy beats this guy.
Here's the honors, yeah.
You know, there's really no debate going on there.
Yeah.
But, like, this is, I would say, because this is really, like, before he got into all the drugs and stuff.
Yep.
Shortly before he goes to ECW, which I think is, like, my favorite era of
Pete Candido.
Candido.
Yeah.
But the two of them, I feel like, would just tear it up.
Oh, they'd have a great match, and it would, it certainly, like, it fits. So it's not like you're saying, like, Liger against, like, a top guy for WWF, and then, again, like you said, you have to worry about the political ramifications of it, or, well, this guy's, like, got 20 pounds on Liger, and, like, how's that going to look, or how's that going to, like, play out, and it's right down Broadway with these two, so
100%. And that's again where, like, that's why I immediately thought of Waltman, like 1, 2, 3 Kid and Liger. Because really at that time, WWF's what you would call like a light heavyweight division or junior heavyweight division was like almost none.
It was prelim guys really, more than anything.
It's all like job guys.
Yeah. They had really no focus on it. But when you think about it, like, if they had concentrated on it, they could have, put it together. They could have said, like, all these guys are under 225 pounds, and you would have had Al Snow and Candido, Jannetty, a couple other, I think they, was Hakushi still there, or Hakushi?
No, so he had just left. He had just left.
Okay.
And I was looking to put him on this card.
And I was going to say,
he was with Michinoku Pro at the time, which is the only reason that I omitted him.
Well, when we do the Michinoku Pro versus WCW 1996.
Of course. When we do our Michinoku Pro versus Chikara
right.
2001.
That could fit in there. So, keep going along.
All right, number 4. So I got 8 matches on this card. So
all right, good.
Now we're hitting the midpoint, and I want to see some crazy shit.
Okay.
And so we're going to have the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion, the Great Sasuke.
Oh, yeah.
He is going to be taking on Mankind. Because I just want to see fucking chaos. And if you've seen...
That's fascinating, yeah.
At the time, Sasuke was more of a junior heavyweight. Obviously, he's the junior heavyweight champion. But in his later years, you saw him get into the deathmatch realm.
Oh, yeah.
And do some hardcore stuff. And so, thinking about that, putting him against Mick Foley, and the crazy shit the two of them would come up with, I think is just astronomically insane.
And I think, like, you could also do comedy stuff between the two of them. Like, Sasuke, again, maybe at this time it wasn't, like, part of his repertoire, but eventually, like, with the deathmatch stuff and with some of the more, like, sort of garbage wrestling that he participated in, like, he did get a little more gaga, and he was doing he had a spot with, like, a garbage can, and...
Yes, yeah, he always puts the garbage can on
and does a battering ram thing, like, so, like, maybe even you say, like, here's a time machine, and give me Sasuke, a little bit of, like, 2004 Sasuke and a little bit of 1995-96 Sasuke, and you certainly have that'd be a lot of fun. And again, like, Cactus Jack, he's Cactus Jack, he knows how to wrestle.
Oh yeah.
With a bunch of guys in Japan and different ways to get gold out of them.
I see this show happening in Japan.
I agree with you. Yeah.
So with the so that was like just the year before where Foley won the King of the Death matches for IWA.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be just bananas.
But you got to have him as Mankind, right?
Oh yeah, well you have to have him as Mankind, but at the same time, I think everyone can put 2 and 2 together.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, they're gonna know what's going on and chant for him no matter what. So that's I didn't even think about that. You got a lot of guys on the New Japan side that I sort of cast away, and I sort of like, all right, I see them on the cards, but I'm like, I got power players that are in here, so. I was surprised we were going to have some overlap, but I think we might have some very different cards.
So that's what it is. Is like I was not as familiar probably as you are with the '96 New Japan. I'm taking the guys that I probably saw in WCW or in later years saw come over to the WWF or are still working in Japan or whatever. So that's kind of who I went with.
Great.
All right, next match. This is I think this is going to be a barn burner. We're going to go with Shinjiro Otani.
Okay.
And he's going to be taking on the newly crowned King of the Ring, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Okay. All right.
Now, this one is a hard one when it comes to, some of these matches I didn't really think about what we're going to do in terms of like finishes or who's going to go over or whatever. But more so just I would have loved to see that in like peak performance era of these two guys. And this is Austin on the come up. Otani, I mean, there's not much to say.
I think he was doing more like that. And this was like Otani was their guy in 94, 95, if memory serves me. But Otani, like, he changed up his style a little bit more. And I think that kind of makes sense when I think about it. Of him versus Austin, like he got a little bit more ground based, and did a lot. He was developing a lot more submission wrestling. So, and I think that might have had to do with an injury and somebody who's listening to this who really knows, like, who can get in the weeds about it.
Exactly,
would certainly be able to say like, oh yeah, he dislocated his kneecap in this match and blah blah blah. So I think he certainly adapted a style and kind of wrestled a little bit more heavyweight to overcompensate for it without putting on the weight. And again, like he's still, was he? Did he just retire or?
Yeah, I mean he was. I saw him at one of the spring break shows like a few years, like 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay,
Nick Gage.
I know he came over, and again, he's another guy that's sort of like had a little bit of like a United States mini tour and rebirth, but at this time, like he's still, especially for the junior side of things, like he's still one of their go-to guys and one of their aces on the junior side. So, and again, Austin, can't say enough about this is the breakout period for Steve Austin. So I think like that's a great matchup, and I think that certainly there's no conflict. Although on paper, like you might say, well, wait a second, but when you think about it in the context, I think it works out real well. So,
this is Austin breaking out, but this is also pre-injury, like pre-neck injury. So when he came in, like shortly before this time, was when he was still the ringmaster, which his whole gimmick was like he's a mat-based technician.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like the two of them going at it.
But I think he had also I think his injury happened in Japan when WCW and New Japan were touring in early 95.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean like prior to the Owen Hart incident.
Oh yeah, exactly. That neck, the neck injury is a totally different story. But like when he had his
was it his knee?
I don't think it was his knee. I think it was his bicep.
Okay.
He had a bad bicep injury, but I think a back and a knee, and again, he certainly got bumped and bruised around, but he had worked with a lot of the mid card guys in New Japan on a couple of those tours, and certainly has experience with working in more of that what they call their mid card style, which is maybe a little bit longer and more of a submission based match at this time. So that's a good match. I never, again, like I said, wouldn't even on paper. I'm like, wouldn't even think about that. So you're beating me to the punch on that one.
All right.
What do you got next?
So next we're going a 6-man. We're gonna go with shortly after, I guess this would take place, the new IWGP tag team champions, Chono and Tenzan. They're gonna team up with Yuji Nagata.
Okay.
And they're gonna take on. And this is where I tried to keep the continuity. The Jim Cornette-led stable of Vader, Owen Hart, and the British Bulldog.
The British Bulldog, all right. Camp Coronet. Glad they made the trip.
Yes. And I mean, Vader's an established Japanese guy. Bulldog's an established Japanese guy.
Yep.
Owen they
had
all
been there.
did their tours.
Yep.
And they're going against what's some of the top guys in New Japan.
And
at
this
the
was
time.
this was right when Chono's the king of the G1. He was Mr. G1. So he was on his way to winning another G1. I think he had just turned heel, and it just got together with Tenzan. And again, I think Tenzan still works now. He still pops up on those battle royals, or like he'll be in like a multi-man match on a Wrestle Kingdom. But like to think about like mid-90s Tenzan, it was always really more of a tag team guy or a faction guy than anything. But for like a pure heel, him and Chono probably were the two of the best like pure heels that they had in the history of that company. And when they got together and they eventually won the IWGP tag team titles, like it kind of mirrored what they were doing in All Japan at the time, where it was like, our main event guys just aren't wrestling for singles belts or in singles tournaments. They are two of our top guys are in, this tag team division, and they're defending belts and they're winning World Tag League and all that other stuff. So to put them with, and even with Yuji Nagata being a young boy, more or less a young boy around this time, just before he went on excursion to WCW, that certainly gives an interesting thing, and that actually kind of opens my mind to, if this had been like, let's crystal ball this. Let's say this was like the makings of a working agreement like they had with WCW, and they changed their working agreement to, becoming more of a WWF territory to send your guys to. I mean, how cool would it be to see like Yuji Nagata managed by Coronet, or managed by like, DiBiase or something like that, like to get that seasoning. I think that in that perfect world, it's a lot better than him being Sonny Ono's boy, and being opening matches on Nitro and the occasional pay-per-view. So I think that certainly lines up Yuji Nagata to be with two top guys, and then wrestling three main event guys for WWF. Vader is still like, getting his feet wet, but I mean, he already by that time is a legend in Japan.
Exactly. And that's like the reason that I put this later in the card, is because like Vader was the guy.
He's going to get a huge huge reaction when he gets there. Absolutely. Yeah. And he better bring that big helmet that he used to carry around that blew the smoke. That was the most awesome thing.
Stopped using that.
It was the most awesome thing. Well, because I think it weighed like, I think he said like in a shoot interview that it weighed like close to 100 pounds. So like, if you're lugging that up the rampway, and then you got to work 20 minutes or a half hour.
Imagine having to check that.
No. Put that back on the truck. Send it, FedEx it back over to the New Japan office and tell them to put it in bubble wrap. I'll come back and get it later. All right, so you got your 6-man tag, and did you book this one as far as like who goes over in it, or is it more?
Yeah, again, like this is another one where it's like, I don't know how you call it. You probably just do a schmoz.
Or, Davey doesn't have a problem taking a pinfall in that, or Owen probably doesn't have a problem.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Because I think when you're thinking about like their guys, like, and this is the first one that you've touched, the first match I think that you've touched on that had one of the Three Musketeers in it. So Chono's already a made man for their company. He's one of their aces. So I think you have to have Chono go over here.
Mm-hmm. Unless in some way, shape, or form. Again, unless, like you said, Nagata was young in his career, unless you have him take the pin.
He could take the pin. You're right. Yeah, and then the other two guys could get pissed off at him, right? And all right.
So, and then, in saying that kind of leads to my last two, which I don't know. I didn't think about who's going to win or not, because I was just trying to piece together the best show possible. Mm-hmm. I think you may have to have two schmozes.
All right.
But... All right, so co-main, we're going to go Hashimoto versus The Undertaker.
Ooh, okay, all right. Yeah, that's
I mean, Hashimoto's the IWGP champion at the time.
That's hard. That's hard hitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's like, in looking at this, I had thought about possibly doing Chono versus The Undertaker, but at the time Chono's doing mainly tag stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah.
So that's where I deferred to Hashimoto, although he's the IWGP champion, and The Undertaker doesn't. You're not going to have him take the pin, so I think that this is.
But you could certainly do like a count out or a double DQ.
A count out, DQ. I mean, at this time, he's still with Paul Bearer, so there could be some sort of interference if you want to,
or have a couple other guys come down, have Mankind interfere and cost them the match, or
Yeah, I didn't even really
because that's the other thing is like. I think we romanticize New Japan as like this, like they don't have any like bullshit finishes, but they certainly had their fair share of bullshit finishes to protect guys that were coming over, especially guys that like The Undertaker would be like I would imagine like you could probably like convince him to be like, all right, you got to be a little bit more heelish when you're here, so watch Hanson and Brody and how they go through crowds and do that. Like just sort of like push people by the face as you're like going to the ring with the music, and the crowd would probably be fucking bonkers for somebody like The Undertaker. But still, like then you've got your other side of it where Hashimoto is a suplex machine and is going to throw, like basically he's going to put the Taker to the limit, like when it comes to like physically throwing him around.
Exactly, which we hadn't at that point seen all that often.
Well, he's getting ready to have that big feud with Mick. Yeah. So it's basically like, or he's right in the ramp up to it, or the beginning stages of it. So it's
so
like
it'd be right at the beginning.
Right. So if you're saying to yourself, well, what's going to get him ready for a Boiler Room match in SummerSlam? Shinja Hashimoto throwing you around for 45 minutes is that's a baptism by fire, my man. So so that's an interesting one. Like I said, I didn't really see it from that point of view, and I certainly, again when you think about it and you sort of like try and think of ways that could be really cool and really awesome. I think there's definitely some cachet in that. And I think there's it gets Hashimoto more over on a 100%. Worldwide stage to have that match than even being the IWGP champion, so to speak.
Because that's a guy that never really came over here.
He never did. No, I think.
And you put him with Taker, and if they can put on a banger, and it's now that opens up a whole new world for that guy.
And then it's like Taker never went over there. Maybe it might have been there.
I think he just had that one match with Jinsei Shinzaki.
Oh, that was in Japan.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I think that's the only one that, aside from like on WWF shows, like that's the only one that I could recall.
Okay.
On a Japanese promotion.
Huh. Well, fascinating then. That's a good
niche.
All right,
and so I think you know where I'm going with the main event.
We're at the main event now.
Yeah, being that Bret Hart's on the. That's another reason why I put Hashimoto with Undertaker is Bret Hart's not around.
All right. Okay.
And so the main event, the WWF World Heavyweight Champion Shawn Michaels taking on the Great Muta.
Now, is he the Great Muta in this match, or is he KG?
See, I've been debating that all day. I'm going to be honest with you. And I think just to pop myself, I'm going to go with the Great Muta.
You're going to go with the Great Muta, and it's yeah.
Because
he could do anything.
I think that's the most iconic thing.
Yeah.
Like, to see those two in the ring together would be.
Yeah, it's special. It has to be special. Muta would be up for the challenge. Muta would be up to doing the job too. I'm gonna go on record and say like Muta's gracious when it comes to like your champ comes to my. And again, well maybe they do a split finish because he did have that match a few years before with Hogan, which is arguably Hogan's best match. Which was really 50-50. And I think it ended up being like an outside interference thing, or like somebody came down.
Go to the limit.
Go to
a 60-minute draw.
Go 60-minute draw. But yeah, you've got Muta before he got hurt.
Yes.
And Shawn before he really got hurt like the next year.
I mean, this was peak.
Yeah. Both guys are 100% ready.
Time out.
Yeah. And they're in, everybody's, like top 20. If anybody watched wrestling from that time or is a historian, they probably have Muta and Shawn Michaels in their top 20 guys of all time. Mm-hmm. And it's two guys that never touched before or after. So, yeah, it certainly would be like that's a dream book for sure. All right. So, excellent. So, I'm going to tackle mine. None of our matches are going to be the same.
And I love that.
I love that. That's the perfect part about this is that, when it all boils down to it, like I figured out different ways to book and go through this. My match card is 10 matches deep.
Okay.
I'm starting off with my my kind of flyer cruiserweight match, Juice and Thunder Liger versus Wildman Mark Merrow.
Ooh.
And the reason why
the
reason why I'm going with this, and again, like I looked at that roster, and I saw Pillman's name on there, and I was like, Brian wasn't medically cleared to wrestle, so cross that off.
Yeah.
Merrow was their guy at the time that they were getting over as he's athletic, he does the shooting star press, he does moonsaults. So although he's taller and rangier than Liger, I still think like he fits the criteria of a guy that can go out, have a good 8 to 15 minute match with Liger to start off, get the crowd really hot. Merrow doesn't have to go over. Liger definitely gets the win. Merrow can also work a little bit of heel if need be, because we'd seen that before and after. So I'm definitely starting with a Juice and Liger and Mark Merrow match. My second match feels more like what they would do in, like, if this was not a televised pay-per-view, but if this was like a house show match.
Yeah.
My next one, it's a 6-man tag. So I've got Ahmed Johnson. I'm flying Ahmed Johnson over there.
Whew.
He'll really put the medics.
How many knee pads is he putting on his thighs?
He'll put the medics to put him through the paces. So I've got my 6-man tag team matches. Ahmed Johnson, Kojima, who is relatively new and young to the business.
Okay.
And Tatsumi Fujinami, who had still been kicking around, and this was, I think, one of his last years or a couple years under New Japan. So that's my babyface 6-man tag team against Hiroshi Tenzan, Goldust, and Mankind.
Okay.
So
you're mixing it up. See, I strictly kind of went one versus the other.
Yeah, and I thought about doing that too. My original card match was one side versus another side, but I said, you know what? It almost makes sense to like mix these guys together and at least for like one match have like, here's a group of our bad guys against here's a group of your good guys. And it's still, that's the type of thing where the WWF loved Ahmed Johnson. And we're still trying to like smash him over. And you've got the legend Fujinami, you've got Ahmed Johnson, and you got Kojima, who's their young guy. I think they would go over Goldust, Mankind, and Tenzan. And again, Goldust takes the pin or whatever in that one. Which brings me to my third match, and this is pretty high on the card for it because I did not do the research and figure out who was the IWGP champion. So I'm not really thinking about belts.
Yes.
But I've got Austin versus Shinja Hashimoto.
Okay, yeah. I mean...
And the reason why I picked that is, I looked at Austin and who he had kind of wrestled with before, and he'd done stuff with Chono, done matches with Muta in the U.S., and I think even with like Riki Choshu and a few other guys. Hashimoto's a guy that he never touched. So... give you the dream match of an up and coming Austin versus at his peak or just about at his peak Hashimoto, and again let these guys sort of throw each other around. Austin doesn't have a bad neck, so instead of like the idea of Otani versus Austin, which could definitely be like a ground and submission. Mm-hmm. Now I've got Austin getting suplexed and dumped on his head, and he has to return the favor and, try to outpower Hashimoto. I don't know how that would come out. You probably have to let Hashimoto go over because, Steve could take a loss there. So,
but at the same time, he's on his come up, and so this puts him in a prominent light.
Hey, exactly,
the champion.
I've got a shot at your title in the early part of this show, and I'm gonna make the most of it.
Oh yeah, especially if you're gonna be like, you could put titles on. If you could put titles on the line, like, hell yeah. That now you have Austin coming off.
I'm the king of the ring, and I'm coming over here to be the king of Japan, and and it's not. It doesn't necessarily hurt your top 2 or 3 guys if Austin gets that position in the card. He's wrestling their champ in the 3rd match, so.
Because he's not going to get a shot at the WWF title for
another year,
2 years,
year and a half.
Yeah,
almost. Yeah. So there's that. My next one.
That one.
My next one. So you weren't flying Psycho Sid over?
I debated it, and the only. I debated it, but
it just surprises me. Like he's.
I did kind of think it's softball season. Is Sid going to take that many days off to fly to Japan?
It's a great point. He wants to be a little bit closer to Arkansas so he can, play center field. But I'm flying him over, and I'm putting Psycho Sid versus Riki Choshu. And now, so at this time you got Riki Choshu, again, a legend in Japan and a guy who's been through the wars and held all their titles. But this is like not quite the end of his career, but he's starting to wind it down. And I think like an attraction match with him versus Psycho Sid, again, that could probably be like 90% on the outside where they're like heaving each other over tables and suplexing, and get a little bit more like, just with the kind of walk and brawl around the place. And, maybe that ends up in a double disqualification either. But it gives me something to do with, puts a legend in there. In a singles match rather than being kind of stuck on the, on the first or second match on the card
or something.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it makes sense to just you have Sid, and Sid. The Japanese fans would probably be crazy for Sid. Showing up in an arena.
Ever go over there?
Nope. I don't think Sid went over there until maybe the 2000s. And even then, it's probably like well past his expiration date.
Yeah.
But yeah, never really prominent. Never that I remember reading about.
That's kind of crazy. Like, I feel like he is like tailor made for that.
He is in
the early to mid 90s.
He is and he isn't. That's the thing is like Spivey was good in Japan. Obviously Johnny Ace, and you're thinking about guys that are that big, but they're a little bit more athletic than Sid was.
True, but I mean they brought guys like Nails over there.
Oh yeah, well, that's a good point. Is he heading to WrestleCon? Did I read that? He's the first guy.
Yeah.
He's the first guy signed for WrestleCon.
Yeah, that's a must
for next year. Yes, everybody just show up in your prison guard outfits, or dress like Vince McMahon and have him punch you. All right, so let's move on to kind of the middle of my card here. I'm very surprised that you didn't have this guy because he, a big international favorite guy who worked a lot of the WCW talent when they did their split cards. Former United States Heavyweight Champion Kensuke Sasaki versus Big Van Vader.
Okay.
And I think this is, in my point of view, it's just, here's two big guys that are, I think both were being built back up as the contenders for the titles around this time. So Sasaki had done the, his excursion to the United States and wrestled with the WCW guys. He was still teaming up with the Road Warriors whenever they were like showing up in Japan. So you've got and he can even be in the Power Warrior outfit as he's going up against Vader. And that's, again, it's two guys that probably had a little bit of history But certainly like gives you like a big, here's your big attraction match with like two guys that are just throwing bombs and, two masters of the power bomb, so to speak. So that would probably be a pretty physical affair. Yeah. And again, like I feel like I'm a broken record. We might have to end this one outside of the ring and do a little bit of a double count out. But I think the fans would get a big kick out of these two throwing chops and haymakers at each other.
Oh, 100%. And the only reason, and like to go back to it, the only reason that I did not include him on my card is because of the way that I structured the rest of it. I didn't feel like there was a guy on the WWF side of things that's going to be able to, because like the only two guys that I could think of that I left off would be like Ahmed Johnson or Sid that could go back and forth with him. Yeah. And I just feel like it would suck because both those guys stink.
Yeah. No benefit to the doubt for Ahmed Johnson getting something out of...
Actually, I'll take that back. Sid doesn't stink, but I don't think that their styles would not go together at all.
Suzuki's a little bit shorter, a little bit stouter. So that's where I would run into the, he could wrestle. And I looked at, I think one of my drafts had him against Taker. And I was like, that's just a little bit too much of a contrast. So I don't think anybody would really buy it. Yeah. So scrap it, let it be Vader and let those guys have at it. I'm going to have a little bit of a cool down match right now. On my mid card. And
get some popcorn or whatever.
Well, popcorn or at least if that other one just slaps as hard as I think it does, you need something to sort of to ease off. So I got Yuji Nagata against Chris Candido.
Ooh, okay. No, I'm not getting popcorn for that one.
Yeah, exactly. Again, you get Nagata, young boy, can kind of throw around, and Candido again just will be ready, willing, and able to do everything he can to get over in Japan, and I think that's just, it goes without saying that reads like an excellent counter program into whatever WCW cruiserweight match they could throw in your face anyway.
100%.
So I'm definitely going for those guys. My next one, I'm going back to tag teams here, and I've got Owen Hart and the British Bulldog versus Otani and Koji Kanemoto.
Okay.
So I've got, again, when you're thinking of they were a team a bunch of times, for tournaments, and I think they were the junior tag team champions for a while there. So again, you got just two guys that match up style to style with each other. You give this one about 20, 25 minutes. I think my card is going to go about 4 hours, which is par for the course. Yeah, exactly. That's a Japan card. We rented the Tokyo Dome for all night, so we're gonna go crazy. But yeah, Owen and Davey against Otani and Kanemoto is, you've got sort of, it's kind of a dream tag team match for, and especially in 1996 when you're thinking about by the end of 96, Davey and Owen are wrestling against Doug Furnace and Phil LaFon when they came over.
And they're tag team champs, I think.
And absolute, they can go fast, they can slow it down, you can get everybody gripped with it, and really get you prepared for the triple main event that I'm going to run.
Okay. And to just make a point, that is a match that would, because listen, Davey Boy Smith was great.
Yeah.
But he could take the day off. When you put him in the ring with guys like that, he's gonna have a second gear. Definitely. And that's
gonna
be a banger.
Yeah, and again, when it comes to, I think some of Owen's best work is in Japan or against guys that are smaller and guys that can, work a little bit of high fly, do a little bit of submission just like him. And I'm looking at right now, I'm imagining that with dueling sharpshooters from both teams.
Ooh, there we go.
So, but again, we're getting ready for the triple main event.
Okay.
In the first leg of my triple main event, I've got The Undertaker taking on the Great Muta.
Ooh.
And I've got he is the Great Muta in all of his regale.
100%.
And this is my spooky man. This is my everything is. Muta's going to get a great match out of Undertaker, much in the way that he got the match out of Hogan a couple of years before. So that's what I'm thinking is like you're going to get the best version of the Undertaker, the one with his, with his flying shoes on, and he's going to be up for wrestling Muta. It's a good opponent. It's guys that never touched.
Yes,
and they were in WCW at the same time in '89 and late '89, early '91. They never had a match. They never came across each other, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Actually, in my triple main event, I think I might have hit all three matches where guys didn't touch. And and I think, like I said, it's you got iconic characters. Vince would go crazy for a match like this. Vince would say, if it's that good in New Japan, it's got to be this good in Madison Square Garden. And they will say, let's sign on the dotted line and let's make this agreement and let this be part of our, our next series of like really big shows and really let the Undertaker have Undertaker had shitty opponents around this time too.
Yes.
Right.
And that's what I was going to say is like, this is the polar opposite to the dog shit that they were booking him in. Of just big guys. Like it was always like a guy bigger than him to try and defeat.
Overpower.
And Foley was the first one that was a smaller guy, but had some sort of like character to him that meshed with the Undertaker in terms of like psychologically.
It was psychologically. It was a guy who was willing to take a beating and come back from the beating that made Mick special with Taker. And I think like that's, dare I say, like that's kind of what got Muta over as himself rather than the Great Muta in Japan, is like a guy that could take that beating and still like win a match or like fighting spirit and kind of guide himself through. So there's the first leg. The second leg.
All right. I'm surprised that wasn't before the main event. Or maybe the main event. And I'm very curious as to where you go right now.
So this is a Legends match. And I know that you had said that you didn't think Brett was going to be around.
Well, I just know that he took time off.
He was on hiatus
from
'96.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So he's not on hiatus anymore.
You son of a bitch.
If I'm putting Ahmed Johnson on a plane and I'm putting Sid Vicious on a plane, I am fucking putting Bret Hart on a plane to Japan, and Bret's going to wrestle Antonio Inoki.
What the fuck?
And this is Twilight Inoki, right? Inoki had wrestled. He was still somewhat active this year, and Inoki had wrestled Flair a bunch in '95 and early '96. So Inoki's still there. Inoki, listen, there's no retirement in Inoki, and Inoki would say, "I never wrestled Bret Hart at the level that Bret Hart is right now, as they're one of their most important and their former heavyweight champ. I want to have a chance to have that match with Bret Hart." They both show up for this. They get bouquets of flowers beforehand. They get everybody has like a bunch of seconds. All the young boys from the New Japan locker room, and a bunch of the WWF undercard guys are in Bret's corner. And you have, it's probably not going to be great, but it's gonna be.
Oh, but that's
it's an attraction match.
To see.
Yeah, exactly. It's an attraction match.
Now, being that you're the host of the show, I'm going to let you get a pass on this because I took it very literally as the rosters for the summer of 1996.
That's true.
These guys wrestled in the summer of '96, but because it's such a good pairing, I will let it fly.
Yeah. Thank you.
And you're the host, so.
I got
to take a back seat.
Yeah, right. And I let you go first, though. If I had gone first, you would have said, "Oh shit, I got to figure out a way to get."
Flag.
I would have.
We're bringing that back 15 yards.
Or you'd be like, "Put this on pause. I got to figure out a way to get Bret to Japan." And
yeah.
Well, sorry, Chris Candido. I think you're staying. I think I got Bret and Liger in my open. All right, main event time. Heartbreak Kid.
I don't know where this is going.
Defending the heavyweight title against Masahiro Chono.
Okay.
Masahiro Chono he's their top heel.
Yes.
Right? He's, again, like I said, he's Mr. G1. He's getting himself to a point at this time that he is the perennial contender. He had that. He started faction wars in Japan that they still do today by creating the faction with Tenzan and I think Masa Saito. So he is the formidable opponent for your babyface heavyweight champion. And there was a lot of matches there in the beginning of the card that New Japan's guys are going over. You got their legends going over. You got their, some of their mid-card guys are going to get, a good chance to show their best stuff. But, and this is...
And I don't think Brett would take umbrage with losing to...
Well, because he's going to... Because, I don't know. I have Brett going over Inoki.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I certainly do. Because, because you have to kowtow to Brett. And Inoki's the figurehead for the company. So really it's Inoki it's Inoki's call on that. He took pinfall losses and submission losses to Flair, to a bunch of other guys that came over from other companies. Yeah. So he's gracious in that way. And I just think if you've got Shawn Michaels coming over as kind of the newly minted top guy, you want him against their established number one heel, who can also go, who's also before he got started to really get beat up by injuries too. You got Chono at Chono's peak, and he's a big nasty physical guy. He's got the STF, he's got the Gotch pile driver, he's got Yakuza kicks, and Shawn he's gonna bounce around for all of that stuff, and he's gonna get the win. But that's my whole card. Did we think of any guys that deserve to come over from the United States that we might have left off?
I threw out my because I just made a list on both sides.
Oh yeah,
I threw that out.
I'm looking at a couple of my. So originally, I actually had a match with the Smoking Guns.
Yes, I believe they were the
tag champs at the time. I was going to let them make the trip.
Yeah, and then I just thought, I don't know about that.
I thought at one point, I had Bob Backlund written down against Fujinami.
Technically, if you go in June of '96, you could have had the Warrior go over.
Yeah, that's before he disappeared. Jerry Lawler.
Yeah.
Jake. But none of those guys screamed Japan.
No,
especially
at that.
Yeah, I think Backlund might have made sense, and you might have gotten away with hey, Bob goes over and wrestles one of their young guys and puts a young guy over, or he wrestles one of their legends, and they hype that up as a legend versus legend. But also Backlund was a goof at this time. He was running for president and losing his mind from the chicken wing. So maybe 2 years before that, you would have had a better version of Backlund when he first turned heel. But
that's why I had such a hard time putting this together, is because the roster at that time was so top heavy, and the underneath was. I mean, when I tried to put together a tag team match, I couldn't think of a single actual tag team. To showcase, because Smoking Guns or whatever. I was like, if you want to have a banger, you could have the Body Donnas go over there.
Yeah, exactly.
But, is that really a draw in any sense of the way?
I'd rather use Davey and Owen as my marquee tag team.
That's what I was. I was debating just doing Chono and Tenzan versus Davey and Owen in a straight up tag team match.
Yeah. That'd be great too.
But I just kind of tried to factor in Vader, but I really can't think of anyone that was omitted. That really, I would say, should have been
that deserved to be part of it. Yeah.
I mean, I had thought of putting Jannetty in a light heavyweight match.
Okay. Yeah. Right. He wasn't totally off the rails.
At the same time, that's when he's doing the new rocker stuff, which is it was. It happened.
Too goofy.
It happened. So,
all right. Yeah. Well, we'll save those. We'll save those debates for another time. I think this was a good exercise. I think we can certainly look to do this in a future episode where we're just taking a roster from, and maybe we'll have it a little bit more closer to modern times and kind of throw some guys out there,
or even just have a whole year as opposed to just a specific
booking
season.
the forbidden door, so to speak.
Yeah.
So,
but at the same time, the fact that we literally didn't have a single match overlap is kind of crazy.
That's listen. Great minds don't think alike, despite what people will tell you. But that'll wrap it up for us for this episode. We will be back in a couple weeks. We've got a topic. It might have a controversy to it. I think we're gonna break down. We're gonna have a discussion. It's not gonna be necessarily a list, but it'll be more of a discussion back and forth about the worst valets in the history of pro wrestling. So.
I got a hot take for you.
Yeesh, I can't wait for it. But we'll tackle that topic soon. So for Tommy, gimmickless Tommy Schultz, this has been the Franchise Mike Madden, and we hope you all have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you very soon.